Soul Magic, Rule 10, Navigating the Waters, Part 1, Physical and Vital. From a treatise on white magic, also known as The Way of the Disciple, commentary by Dr. Lisa Love. Overview, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell for alerts if you want to know about upcoming videos. I also would invite you to like, comment, and share. 2 goals of soul magic. In previous videos, we have mentioned these goals as the soul transforming the 3 aspects of the personality into becoming the soul, and the now soul-infused personality creates thought forms out of the ideas received by the soul from the solar angel, and these thought forms are to be used in service. So if you are new or need a reminder, here is the Rule 10 quick overview. Rule 10. As the waters bathe the form created, they are absorbed and used. The form increases in its strength. Let the magician continue until the work suffices. Let the outer builders cease their labors then, and let the inner workers enter on their cycle. As the waters bathe the form created, the waters of the astral plane, made up of emotions, glamours, desires, and dreamlike experiences derived from the magician and the people and environment around the magician, bathe the form. They are absorbed and used, are absorbed or stored into the mental, emotional, etheric, physical body of the magician, as well as into the thought forms he or she is creating. The form increases its strength. These astral forms in the magician's body and the thought forms the magician creates, colored with astral matter, grow stronger, for better or worse. Let the magician continue until the work suffices. The magician now mothers the embryo of their new evolutionary form and the thought form associated with that next stage of spiritual evolution until both reach maturity, for better or worse. Let the outer builders cease their labor then. The outer builders, or physical forces that impacted the magician at the cellular level, and the vital forces impacting the magician at the etheric level, cease their efforts now that the embryo, or the next phase of evolution of the magician and the associated thought forms, are in place. And let the inner workers enter on their cycle. The inner workers associated with the soul help the magician keep his or her eye on the magician's new evolutionary form and the associated thought forms until they are mature enough to be utilized in service or are aborted. Now that we have gone through a review of Rule 10, let's get an overview of the waters that Rule 10 is talking about. As stated in previous videos about Rule 10, of the 15 rules listed in the book A Treatise on White Magic by Alice Bailey, Rule 10 comprises almost a third of the book, so the videos on Rule 10 are to be considered overview videos only. And by the time we reach Rule 10, the form has already been created, and now the waters are said to bathe or influence the form. As a reminder, the forms being bathed are of 2 kinds, and these points are summarized from A Treatise on White Magic, page 281. 1. The evolving form, where the soul is trying to evolve the form of the personality into its next evolutionary step. That form will either be the form of a Group 6 aspirant, where one is first becoming aware of the soul and is aspiring to tread the spiritual path, but often still wants a lot of the goodies of being a personality. A Group 7 probationary disciple, you're on probation, and that means you fall off the path quite a bit. Or Group 8 accepting, pledged, or accepted disciple. That means you're accepting the disciplines. You're pledged to use the will to follow through on the disciplines and eventually become an accepted disciple. Now, the accepted disciple stage starts at the end of Group 7 probationary disciple and goes all the way through Group 8. Then finally we become Group 9 initiates, where the personality is now soul infused. The second kind of form is the associated thought form. These are the thought forms the personality creates at whatever level it is at, that are made up for purely selfish gain, are a mixture of selfish and unselfish motives, or as one becomes a soul-infused personality as a Group 9 initiate, is purely unselfish. And the progress of the form in whatever evolutionary group it is in depends upon the capacity of the person to both recognize the waters bathing the form and to learn to consciously accept or reject the waters that are trying to influence the form for better or worse. That's what's happening here. The form is set. Let's say you are deciding you're going to evolve as a Group 7 probationary disciple. It is set. The thought forms you are creating at that level are set, but they can become diluted by the waters, influenced in a negative way by the waters, or drowned in the waters. That's why in Rule 10, we have to become conscious of what these waters are so we can pick or choose them more and more. Types of waters. Waters bathing the form. Rule 10 lists and then extrapolates on 7 types of waters, which it also refers to as energies. In summary, they are 1. Physical energy that represent the cells in the body. 2. Vital energy that represent the etheric body and the chakras. 3. Astral energy, the emotions and desires of both those in and out of incarnation who influence us. 4. Mental energy, thoughts and beliefs coming from one's own mind, the minds of others, and the universal mind. 5. Personality energy, or personalities as a whole that range from purely selfish and seemingly soulless and very unselfish and full of soul and even spirit. 6. Planetary energy that includes not only our Earth as a planet, but other planets in our solar system. 7. Solar energy coming from our sun and its cosmic rays. The goal is to both understand and master how these energies influence us, which only spiritual training can help us do. Also, it should be noted that in this video, Navigating the Waters Part 1, we will talk about the physical and vital energies only. Navigating the Waters Part 2 will talk about astral energies, then Navigating the Waters Part 3 and 4 will discuss remaining energies listed above. And this list comes from A Treatise on White Magic, page 292. The waters. 1. The physical forces. The outer builders, or the cells, and notice it says that the outer builders cease their labors and the inner workers enter on their cycle. So what are the outer builders? They're connected to the physical forces and are the cells in our bodies. Rule 10 says that in the creative process, we first need to consider the cells, which are, quote, the groups of forces which concerns purely the form side, and that are the work of the outer builders, and which are the predominant factors right up to the stage of the probationary path. These are the forces inherent in matter itself. They deal with the body nature and might be listed as follows. 1. They produce the quality of the cell forces operating entirely on the physical plane, which produce a peculiar type of physical body. 2. They produce the magnetic attraction between two physical bodies and the racial types. 3. They also guide a master of the wisdom as he builds his physical body at will for the carrying forward of his work in any time or place. Treatise on White Magic, page 281. And as I've said in all these videos, this book was written 100 years ago. They use the male pronoun for everything in every book everywhere. Don't let its use here trip you up. I also want to say, why are they saying that the outer builders are the predominant factors right up to the stage of the probationary path? That is because only when we get onto the probationary path are we truly starting the process of the disciplines that help our physical, emotional, and mental bodies become soul infused. Before then, our understanding of the cells and their influence is either something we don't have or it's something that unconsciously just happens. The foods we eat, the thoughts we think, the emotions we feel, all these things affect our cells, but we don't really understand that they do, or if we do kind of understand it, we don't have any control consciously over it. So what is meant by the above? For starters, previously, we have learned that of the 10 evolutionary soul groups, groups 1 to 6 are coordinating the three aspects of the personality, mind, emotions, and the etheric physical, but they are doing so in a mostly unconscious way. As we become a Group 7 probationary disciple, we start the process of consciously working with the waters of first the outer builders of the vital forces, etheric and chakras, and the physical forces, cells, DNA, and genetics. Eventually, by the time we reach Group 10, mastery, or become a master of the wisdom, we have used the inner workers of our spiritual nature to help us not only understand these first two waters of the outer builders, our cells, DNA, and etheric chakras, we have consciously altered them to give us a completely spiritualized etheric and physical body. So you start to see this concern, especially a little bit with Group 7 aspirants and more so with Group 7 probationary disciples, with the physical body and the etheric body, learning things like Kriya Yoga, Kundalini Yoga. There's a training that starts to happen about how to consciously start mastering your vital body and your cells, these two particular waters. So Rule 10 is now going to go on and explain about the cells and their impact. And what's remarkable to me is 100 years ago, there was very little known about the cells compared to what we know now. So this information to me that I've taken from the book was pretty interesting. So what is the role of the cells in our body and how are they impacted? Rule 10 gives us three things to look at when it talks about the physical forces, which are again mainly the cells. Note, I have put the main points to focus on from the text in blue. So here are the physical forces. Quote, A, those emanations which, issuing from the cells themselves and dependent upon their quality, produce a good or a bad effect, are coarsening or refining in their influence, and raise or lower the physical vibration of the united cell body. Thus, as we well know, the physical effect of a coarse, brutal, animal-natured man will be different to that of the refined, beautifying results of contact with an older soul, functioning in a body cultured, cleaned, disciplined, and purified. So we see that with these physical forces, waters, we are trying to, with our physical body, make it more cultured, cleaned, disciplined, and purified. Continuing with the quote. B, those emanations of a purely physical kind, which are responsible for the chemical affinity between one animal body and another, which produces the coming together of the sexes. It is an aspect of animal magnetism, and is the response of the cells to the call of other cells, acting under the law of attraction and repulsion. It is shared by man with the animals, and is instinctive and free from all mental reactions. And the quotes here come from Treatise on White Magic, pages 282 to 283. And this is interesting because as we get onto the probationary path, Group 7 probationers, we become more aware of the influence of sex in our lives. Who we're mating with, why we're mating with that person. We're trying to transfer the sacral center energy up to the throat center, and we're trying to sublimate the sexual impulse and only engage in it for procreation or engage in it in a conscious and loving way. Why? Because during sexual relations, especially orgasm, there is a blending of the etheric bodies and a direct impact on the cells of each person engaged in that act. So we want to become conscious of these waters, and part of becoming conscious is becoming aware of the sexual animalistic instinct and trying to uplift it and trying to understand why we are drawn to certain people that we are, whether we engage in sexual relationships with them or not. There is a magnetism that draws us to certain people. Is that good or bad? Does it have a good or bad effect? Will it coarsen or refine the influence on us? We start to ask these questions more and more seriously as we become concerned about the waters influencing us. The cell's impact and questions. C, going back to quote from the book, the type of force is that mysterious something which enables the physical body to recognize as harmonious or congenial a physical surrounding or environment. For instance, it is that undefinable reaction which results in two human beings, apart from all sex attraction, for people of the same sex experience it with each other, having a harmonious effect physically upon each other. That's Treatise in White Magic, again, pages 282 to 283. To start mastery of ourselves and the physical forces, we are told that those who are Group 7 probationary disciples and Group 8 accepting pledged and accepted disciples need to start by asking the following questions. So we're going to go back to quotes from the book. A, what should the disciple ask himself should be the vibratory quality of the cells of that body of the individuals who compose it. I'm going to pause and interject my own saying. So we start to become aware of the people we surround ourselves by, knowing that even science is starting to prove that we become more and more alike the 5 people we are most surrounded by. So we become discerning about that. Now, we are compassionate beings. We will at times be around people who may, quote, lower our vibration, end of quote, but we can be what I call causative to that. They do not impact us. We impact them with our positive, loving presence. But if they're starting to impact us, then we need to become more discerning and be more careful until we can become causative and not receptive to their influence. Going back to the quote. Next question. B, what should be the quality of its attractive force and of the magnetic effect it is to have in the world? Again, we're concerned with what is the quality of the different things that we're around. It isn't just people. It can be the food. It can be the environment. It can be the atmosphere we put ourselves in, the music we listen to, the kinds of paintings we surround ourselves by. All of these are things that we start to become more discerning about because it has a magnetic effect. Something is either positive or negative. It's either attractive or repulsive. We can either affect it in a positive way or we are affected by it in a positive or either a negative way. The final question from the book. C, what does the group possess through the medium of its corporate units which will put it in rapport with other groups and so make it harmonious in its relations with them? These questions warrant careful attention and should be considered by all group builders. Treatise on White Magic, page 281. So, why is it saying, what does the group possess and how can it be put in rapport with other groups? That is because, especially as we move in becoming Group 9 initiates, it's about group work, groups working with different groups. And we start to ask the same questions. What is this group like? How will this group affect our group? Can our group be influenced by this group in a positive way, or will it be a negative way? And we need to be discerning and careful. These are questions we start to ask. Now I want to go back to where I put something in blue. To recognize as harmonious or congenial physical surrounding or environment. Because as we start to get on the path, and many of you probably know this, we become sensitive. And as we go into an environment, we can sense, many of us right away, whether it's going to have a positive or negative effect on us. Influencing the outer builders. Conscious work with the cells begins in earnest as a Group 7 probationary disciple, where things like diet and the foods we eat are more carefully considered. Those are in the rules for probationers, and I have videos on that on the Soul to Spirit YouTube channel. The Group 7 probationary disciple is also becoming more conscious of the use of sexual energy and the animal magnetism, with the goal of consciously lifting these energies up into the throat center and being careful with who we engage in sexual relations with, since orgasm is essentially, as I've already said, the blending of our energy with another person. The Group 7 probationary disciple also helps to change the cells by watching how thoughts and speech impact the cells, and everything is done to try and make the body and personality more magnetic in a spiritual way. You can become very magnetic, especially in a Group 6 materialist way, and a lot of Group 3, 4, and 5 people who aren't very developed mentally and who are very emotionally polarized will often follow Group 6 people who are very dynamic but also very selfish and can even be dictatorial and pathological and narcissistic. We've also seen in some of our videos for Group 7 probationary disciples that they can become drawn to people who are spiritual but only somewhat spiritual and who are full of glamours. And that can affect them in a negative way and affect the cells in their bodies in a negative way. So again, the path is increasingly about more and more spiritual discernment. As we become a Group 8 accepting and pledged disciple, the spiritual community becomes even more important because they help us build up our physical stamina and buffer stress, allowing us to be more active in group life and service, which in turn keeps our cells and our physical organism overall in good shape. The waters. 2. The centers. The centers. So as we've seen in the previous rules, especially as we get into rules 4, 5, and 6 of A Treatise on White Magic, we're beginning to understand the centers and their use, especially through the practices of Samadhi and Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is a way of purifying and impacting the centers in a conscious way. The next category of waters that Rule 10 talks about are connected to the vital forces or centers. See A Treatise on White Magic, pages 283 to 291. Again, this is an overview. At the time A Treatise on White Magic was written about 100 years ago, the chakras or centers were relatively unknown, except for those associated with secret societies in the West and ashrams in the East. Today, a great deal of information, some of it distorted, exists about the centers. There are even books out on what are called the minor centers and nadis, and those are mentioned as well in Rule 10, not in detail, but they're mentioned in general. Rule 10 shares how the centers are associated with the nervous system, a fact most spiritual seekers know about today, and then shares the following. Quote, the centers have 3 main functions, and remember it's in blue because I put it in blue to emphasize it. First, to vitalize the physical body, and in brackets is my words, this is shared with all animals and created forms. First, to vitalize the physical body, and this set of brackets is actually in the quote, it's not me adding something, that this is shared with all animals and created forms. Second, to bring about the development of self-consciousness in man, again these brackets are in the quote, man alone. Don't get tripped up with the male pronoun. Third, to transmit spiritual energy and sweep the entire man into a state of spiritual being. Spiritual man, those brackets are in the quote. So note here I've said the brackets in these quotes are not my addition but are in the book. However, the blue bold text is my emphasis, and also this comes from A Treatise on White Magic, page 285. So what are the 3 main functions? That the chakras vitalize the etheric body, they give it vitality, they help develop self-consciousness as we progress through the different chakras opening and awakening. We become more conscious of ourselves as a personality, separated and isolated from others, and then more conscious of ourselves as a soul, and then eventually more conscious of ourselves as spirit. And third, the chakras transmit spiritual energy. Continuing with quotes from the book, let's look at some quotes about the centers and the role of vitality. Quote, the response of the etheric vehicle of all forms and its capacity to appropriate, to utilize, and to transmit are dependent upon the condition of the centers of the chakras, as they are called in the East. These include not only the well-known 7 major centers, but numbers of lesser vortices of force, as yet unnamed and unknown in the Occident. It is dependent also upon the quality of the etheric vehicle, upon its aliveness, and also upon the interlacing network in which the centers have their place, and which, in its entirety, is called the web or the golden bowl. Continuing with the quote, if this is clear of impediments and of sediment, that's the etheric network, and if its channels are not clogged, then the circulating rays, energies, and forces can find an easy medium and can circulate unimpeded throughout the entire body. They can then utilize those centers which are responsive to their vibrations and can be passed on and through to forms in other or the same kingdoms in nature. Here lies the secret of all scientific and occult healing. To consciously work with the centers, people need to, and that's my bracket, discipline their lives and so control their appetites that they build a clean body and provide clear channels for the passages of force from and through themselves to others. Treatise of White Magic, page 285. And our final slide in this video, the conscious work with the centers. As we become a Group 7 probationary disciple, we increasingly become aware, as we've said, of the waters of also the vital force, not just the physical force, which are the centers or chakras. The Bailey teachings overall and a treatise on white magic seem paradoxical in that they tell us a great deal about the centers and even give us some techniques for working with the centers, and they warn us from working directly on the centers, encouraging us to, at this stage, mainly become aware of what they are and to live a clean life that will activate the centers naturally. I believe this paradox is resolved by reminding ourselves that we need to know what we are doing before we work with the chakras and stimulate the glands associated with them. From my understanding of the teachings, we only begin to consciously work directly on the centers as we become a Group 8 accepting, pledged, and accepted disciple. That means we have fulfilled the developmental task of this stage before any work on the centers can be safely done. Note, to understand these developmental tasks, watch the videos on Group 8 on the Soul to Spirit YouTube channel. Finally, the thought forms we are likely to create will also have to do with the centers that are being activated. Since the Group 7 probationary disciple is raising the energy of the sacral center into the throat center, we are likely to see thought forms that attempt to spiritualize sex, such as in distorted Tantra yoga practices that give license to random and uncommitted sex. With the Group 8 accepting, pledged, and accepted disciple, a transfer is going on between the solar plexus and heart centers. Here, the temptation to succumb to the love of power instead of the power of love can be seen, and the failure to pass the test of the second initiation because one drowns in the waters can happen until the shift into love, service, and sacrifice is complete. So there you have the overview of the first 2 waters that we need to learn to understand and master, physical and vital. Want to stay aware of the other videos coming up? Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for alerts. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. I do respond to comments. And most of all, I encourage you to become a patron at patreon.com, Soul to Spirit. There are many perks, including books, charts. I often talk to my patrons, usually once a week, about things that are coming up, ask their feedback, and appreciate their feedback when they give it. And most of all, you can go to the soul2spirit.com website to stay informed. And thanks for watching.